Morning, everyone. Have a seat, please. It is getting a bit chilly. It is a bit cold. No snow really on the forecast, though. Maybe in a couple of weeks we might see some of the white stuff, but just watching those, allowing the hamster to sort of run over the hand, as it were. That's the sort of mime, or meme, is it? No, the mime for being cold. It is. Anyway, we're going to start off by singing the school song. So please, if we could just pass the hymnals along so everyone has a copy. So something that's always been really important to me, and that was really introduced early in my life and then was sort of hammered into my upbringing, was how important manners are. And so it's this idea that manners is how you conduct yourself around other people, what those behaviors are like that demonstrate respect, understanding, empathy perhaps, and that essentially adhere to sort of rules or a type of etiquette, like within a society or within a culture. Please and thank you are often those pieces that are introduced very early, and that's something that we as parents always try and reinforce and have our children as they grow up thinking about and being aware that it's really important when you ask for something to say please, and when you receive something to say thank you, okay, or demonstrate gratitude through those words and demonstrate appreciation through those words. Of course, there are many other things that go into manners, but even just starting there is something that seems quite simple and straightforward, but is very much something that needs to be learned and needs to be practiced. And the more you receive or see other people demonstrating good manners, I think the more likely you are as well to value them and then to try and incorporate them into your own behaviors. So one of the things that at this time of year and that we've been doing the last couple of weeks in our home is writing thank you letters. So some of you will have received things over the break, sort of Christmas presents, or Santa might have been good to you, but typically we write thank you letters to let those know who sent us things or gave us things for Christmas, how much we appreciated them, perhaps what we're looking forward to doing, with whatever the present was, and just really showing that level of gratitude. I had. As I was skim reading a few, I'm not going to embarrass you, Hector, but I was skim reading some thank you letters, and it was, there was a sort of, I remember one to my brother Harry, saying thank you so much for this Under Armour top that I got. My favourite present is listing something else, which kind of amused me, and I know he would very much appreciate that too. But it is that the time that it takes to write something, to write a thank you as well, I think is so important for the recipient. To receive something handwritten, there's been a process, the address has gone onto the envelope, a lot of care and love and attention has gone into the words, and it's very considered. Think about that, because often I think we live in a very sort of text-based society, whether that's email or whether it's on the phone, whether it's through social media, and potentially, or not potentially, but I'd like you to consider the value of the written word. Again, actually writing someone a thank you note. If you've been around to their house for dinner, or, as I say, at this time of year, perhaps you've received something. Lunar New Year is coming up, for example, as well at the end of this month. So that might cause you to write a thank you to someone that you love. I think for me what's interesting about manners as well is that they are cultural, and the interpretation of which behaviors are, proper or sort of acceptable or expected vary from culture to culture. I remember growing up, manners around the dining table were always really emphasized, and I still believe are really very important. And my wife, Mrs. Monroe, was sharing with me that at her school, you weren't allowed to ask for something to be passed to you. You couldn't say, excuse me, can you pass the salt? You had to wait to be offered it. And the idea being that it should be the emphasis should be on the person looking out for what other people need rather than thinking about what you need. So if you really wanted the salt, I'm sure this is probably how it played out. You know, you'd say someone's name at the end of the table and you go, "Would you like the salt?" And they'd go, "No, I'm good, thanks." "Would you like the salt?" "Oh, thank you, I'd love it." Okay, so it was that sort of idea, and I rather like that in a way because it does cause you to look around and think, what does someone next to me like? Should I offer them the butter? Is there, olive oil or some salad dressing? They've just got some salad. Would they like some salad? Okay, so like a real level of courtesy and respect and an awareness of people around you. What I found interesting, and as well working in education and just being around so many more people from different cultures, as well as that I've realized that manners are very culture specific. And so certain table manners that I'd consider polite are less part of other cultures, and certain table manners from other cultures that I'd considered either impolite or not the right way to do things are very much the right way to do things in that culture. So that was a really interesting learning for me. For example, knives and forks. I grew up with knives and forks on the table. Other people didn't. Like not everyone does. And so, the sawing motion of a knife can be quite foreign to students who've grown up using chopsticks their whole life, where the idea is you use your chopstick and you pick up whatever's on your plate and you eat it off the chopstick, and which I very much appreciate and I totally get. But there was a time there where I was trying to decipher and I was trying to sort of instruct and anticipate that students who'd come from that culture would just know how to use a knife and fork because those are proper table manners. So it's quite interesting as you think about manners and how you're interpreting people's manners. Think about what their cultural background is and what sort of etiquette might exist in other parts of the world. Okay, there's also, I think, a really important piece for you to consider about travel. Okay, and some of you will have traveled and explored different countries, but I think that's why it can really broaden your minds, broaden your approaches and understanding of other people, is to try and go and experience other cultures. Yes, when you're on a holiday, but also when you're older to try and live and stay for longer too, if you can. Eye contact. Okay, so table manners is one thing, and I mention this because, even last night something happened in the dining hall, and there was a very loud noise that was generated from a group, and I think it was sort of amusing them, and I think they were highlighting something, and I don't think it was really intended to be rude, but it disrupted the entire meal for everyone else, and it might have interrupted their conversations and what they were talking about. And so it wasn't necessarily that they shouldn't have been complimenting or celebrating their friend on whatever they'd achieved or whatever they'd done, but it was just the time and the place. For my interpretation, was rude because it was interruptive of conversations. And so I think that's something that you should think about is interruption, or how can you be patient when other people are in the middle of a conversation. Try not to interrupt them. It can always be tricky, but that's probably something that you've heard your parents say to you too. But think about that as you move through the coming days and the coming weeks, is that manners and etiquette and the way we behave are habits that we generate over time, and we actually have to be deliberately thinking about them until we progress or get to a stage where they're automatic and we know why we're doing them and we understand the value of them. Eye contact was another interesting one for me. And I mean, as I look out now, I can see a lot of eyes, and my interpretation through the culture that I've grown up in is that eye contact is it's a gesture of respect. It demonstrates attention. It also just creates a connection between people. Sort of I see you, for those of you who've watched the movie Avatar. However, it's also, and I've said to students, can you look at me please when I'm talking to you? And I didn't realize initially that sometimes when I've said that, I've actually been asking people to do something that in their culture is actually not what they learn to do or not what they've been taught to do. Okay, so sometimes that too much eye contact, or eye contact is actually inappropriate between people who are in a different sort of hierarchy of society. Okay, so that's something that was interesting or I think is also important for me to consider is how do we in a community, when we have people from so many different cultural backgrounds, also try to understand, okay, what is culturally acceptable here in this space, in this environment? So if you're moving into another culture, like for example, if you went and lived in another country, trying to learn, okay, what are the cultural nuances there? What are the etiquettes? What are the manners and the behaviors that would allow me to demonstrate respect in that culture? What are the manners and what are the etiquettes that are anticipated over here? And I think that's, from an educational standpoint, that's obviously on us as well as educators to try to share that, to try to express, what certain gestures and what certain behaviors actually communicate in this culture too. So eye contact was an interesting one for me as well, because a lack of eye contact is in a number of cultures is not actually a sign of rudeness. Too much eye contact can be a sign of aggression, and it can actually be impolite as well. So you might say, well, what do I stand to gain from trying to work on my manners and try to develop my manners? And there's been some research in this area too, so I'll just bring up a couple of sort of examples from that. The customer service world, so Cal Berkeley did some research into this and found that gratitude and appreciation in the customer service world led to increase in loyalty, higher satisfaction for customers, and then ultimately higher tips as well. So some of you may end up going into the service industry as well. And I think if you're equipped, if you're a polite person and you carry a demeanor that demonstrates you know what good manners are, and you demonstrate that with people, not only could you stand to gain loyalty and trust, but also it might be financially profitable for you. Conflict resolution. So manners create an atmosphere of respect, and they can de-escalate situations of conflict. Okay, so sometimes just whether it's saying please and thank you or addressing someone courteously when you're going through having a challenging conversation can be hugely helpful in generating a tone of respect that helps you resolve whatever it is that you're discussing. Negotiations too. So it's found that greater success is achieved when people are polite to each other in negotiations. In 2017, in the Journal of Psychological Science, there was an article written that said people who express gratitude towards others are more likely to experience well-being themselves, emotional well-being themselves. In healthcare, studies show that manners create an environment of trust and empathy. Okay, so there are also a lot of studies and research that's been done in this area that demonstrate the benefits of manners, not only to the people who are invested in trying to follow some of these etiquettes and ways of behaving, but also for when you're on the receiving end of them. And this one I think is just so key, and I've sensed that, I've felt this as well through my life, is when you're polite, people are more likely to help you. Like, I've really found that. When you deal with people as well as you can, and you're courteous, and you ask for things nicely, you're more likely to get them. I think your reputation as someone who's thoughtful and considerate will precede you. Good manners help to open up doors. And perhaps just as importantly, they can help you to avoid awkward situations as well. Like if you bump into someone in the hallway saying, "Excuse me," or you do something that you realize might be a bit rude, trying to just interject as well. Sometimes it can be a bit awkward to actually apologize or to say whatever you might need to say. So trying to get into those sorts of habits. I haven't always, but I really have a lot of value in this phrase of manners maketh man, or manners maketh mankind. That suggests that the true measure of someone is not in their wealth or their social status or their appearance, but it's in their behavior and their conduct. So that in essence, it emphasizes that your character and the way you treat other people is what defines you as a person. So as you move through today, tomorrow, and the upcoming weeks, just maybe think about your courtesy, your manners, and try to conduct yourselves as well as you can in those areas. You won't regret it, and it will come back to you, and you will benefit from it in so many ways, and others will too. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to pass over to Mr. Robertson. Do you want to say a few words? Sure. Yeah? Sure. A few words from Mr. Robertson.
Yeah, thank you. Just very briefly. Thank you, Mr. Munro. Among the many important points that he made this morning, one of them that I want to pick up on is this whole notion of thinking about other people, right? It's a constant life challenge to get yourself out of yourself and your relative obsession by you and how you're feeling and how you're looking and what's happening to you and all that type of thing, and what other people are doing or needing. Manners are a gift. In my world, manners are a gift. When you show good manners, you're actually giving something to someone. And in my experience in life, I've had so many good encounters from just a show of good manners. Simple as that, right? Countless times, because I'm one of these people that is always holding doors open for people and always letting other people go through the door first and all this. Countless times I've had people say, oh, thank you, and almost express surprise. And here's the kicker. Sometimes that's led to some really nice conversations, right? I can think of times where I've held the door open for someone at a shopping mall, and they've said, oh, thank you. And I said, oh, you're most welcome. And then they've said to me, is that a Scottish accent? And I've said, it is actually, yeah. Oh, well, my mother was from Scotland. Oh, where was she from? And you have this conversation, which is a good thing to do, and you should be looking to have conversations, because too often these days, as you know, we only have to go to an airport and compare it to going to an airport 20 years ago. 20 years ago, you went to an airport and there were lots of people walking along to get to their gate or their flights or whatever, and they would smile at each other, or they would say hi, or they would sit down at a gate and start chatting. What are people doing now? They've got their heads down in their phones, like, for the most part, right? 95% of them. So creating interactions, I think, is just a really good thing. So I just build on that, advocate the power of good manners, thinking ahead, someone's arriving. And of course, just so that life isn't just too serious, one of the things that, because I have this mischievous sense of humor, one of the things I used to do, if someone went through a door, let's say a glass door, and then they just let it go behind them, just went through without turning around, I would race forward and I'd bump my hand against the door to make quite a loud noise, and then I would pretend the door had caught me on the nose, and I would be over like this, just so I could have a laugh when they turned round and said, oh, I'm so sorry. And I said, no, you didn't get me, but you could have. So here's what you could do in the future. So there we go. Thank you.
Okay, so I've got half an eye on the time here. Let's belt out one verse. Okay, so I think let's do, we're going to do the third verse, okay, of the school song. And not a bad start today, but you've left some room for improvement, which I appreciate, because we're just going to feel that now. Okay, so if we can, let's muster a bit more volume, and we're going to sing the third verse only. Okay, ever mindful of our colours, the school song, please stand.